Welcome to our deep dive, into the disappearance of Alicia Navaro. Listener sent in this true crime podcast episode about her case, and we're going to break it all down for you.
Yeah, missing person cases, especially when you start talking about online activity. I mean, they can be really hard to figure out, and this case file, it definitely gives us a lot to think about.
All right, so let's try to set the scene, okay? Mm-hmm. It's September 15th, 2019. Mm-hmm. Glendale, Arizona. Seems like any other morning until, Jessica, Alicia's mom, finds some stuff that doesn't quite add up. Mm-hmm. Stacked chairs, cinder blocks, a shovel by the back wall. I mean, it kind of looks like someone might have, tried to make an escape.
It does kind of look that way, but, there's some things that don't fit, the tools they used, and something really important is Alicia's autism diagnosis. I mean, that raises some questions, could she really plan something like that? Could there be something else going on? Some other people involved?
And then there's this note. Jessica finds it the next day. It says, "I ran away. I'll come back. I swear. I'm sorry, Alicia." Did she write that on her own? Was she forced? It's hard to know for sure.
Right. And this is where things start to get even more interesting. The note and Alicia having autism, it made Jessica really push for a silver alert, the kind they usually use for older folks or people with cognitive problems.
And you know what? This is actually a really big deal. It made Alicia the first minor in Arizona to ever get a silver alert. Talk about a parent fighting for their kid.
Yeah, it really shows how determined Jessica was. But, it also makes you wonder, do we need to rethink how we handle these missing person cases? Like, what about the people who don't fit into those neat little boxes?
Okay, so we've got this maybe escape scene and cryptic note, and now we're thinking maybe a silver alert wasn't the right call either.
And on top of all that, Alicia was really into online gaming. I mean, that was her place to be, where she felt connected. But I gotta wonder, could that have made her a target? It's a really important question in this case. You see, for people on the autism spectrum, the online world can be a lifeline. It's a way to connect with others, without all the pressures of face-to-face stuff. But, and this is the big zub, but it also opens them up to predators, people who know exactly how to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool for connection. But then there's this dark side lurking just underneath. And it makes me think about what happened a couple of years before this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Jessica found some weird texts on Alicia's phone from this guy she met online.
That's scary, and it adds a whole new level of worry to this case. Even if parents are careful and talk to their kids about online safety, it's so hard to protect them from these guys. They're masters at manipulation, grooming their victims. It's a constant battle.
So they've got a possible escape scene, a confusing note, and now this whole online grooming thing. What did the investigators find out early on?
Well, first they tried to track Alicia's phone, but it was turned off the night she disappeared. They also did what's called a tower dump, basically. They got data from all the phones that used a certain cell tower near Alicia's house around the time she vanished.
Oh, yeah. I read about that. Can you imagine going through all that data? It'd be like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Exactly. It takes forever, and it shows a big problem that law enforcement faces. They just can't keep up with technology sometimes. The old ways of investigating just don't always work in this digital age.
And then the podcast mentioned that getting records from those online gaming platforms can be really hard. Text chat logs, they might have those. Mm-hmm. But voice and video chats, they often don't record those or even keep them. So piecing together what Alicia was doing online, it's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
It's a huge roadblock. It's almost like some of the most important clues have just vanished.
Yeah, so frustrating. On top of everything else, the investigation gets hit with another curveball. The COVID-19 pandemic hits.
Oh, yeah. The pandemic changed everything. It slowed down investigations. And then there's this other thing to think about, everyone's wearing masks. It's like they accidentally gave predators a disguise. It makes tracking them down even harder.
Ugh, it's a chilling thought. So here's Jessica, facing every parent's worst nightmare. On top of that, the investigation is struggling to keep up with the digital world, and then a global pandemic hits. That's a lot to deal with.
It really is. But what's amazing is that Jessica just refused to give up. She jumps right into her own investigation, searching, giving interviews, putting flyers everywhere. She's determined to find Alicia.
And she even starts using TikTok. She uses social media to make sure people don't forget about Alicia and to connect with other families going through the same thing. It reminds me of Sarah Turney, remember her? She used social media to raise awareness about her sister Alicia's disappearance. It's incredible how families are using technology to keep these cases from being forgotten.
It shows how strong and resilient they are and how much parents love their children. And, it's not just about raising awareness. Sometimes these platforms can actually help spread information, maybe reach someone who has a clue.
It's kind of like crowdsourcing an investigation, right?
Yeah.
But even with all that effort, there's still so many questions about what happened to Alicia. The note makes it seem like maybe she ran away. But then there's her autism and the whole online grooming thing.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if she really left on her own.
It's a real mystery, and the podcast doesn't really give us any definite answers, but it does show us how challenging these cases are, all the uncertainty and heartbreak that comes with them.
And that's actually a great place to pick things up in part 2. We'll dive into some of the theories about what happened to Alicia and talk more about the challenges the investigators faced and the important work of organizations like the Anti-Predator Project.
Yeah, definitely stick around. There's a lot more to uncover in this case. So we're back digging deeper into Alicia Navaro's disappearance. Remember how we were talking about how complicated this whole thing is? That back and forth between did she run away or was there some predator involved?
It's like a puzzle with some pieces missing. And it feels like the regular ways of investigating might not be enough. So where do they go from here?
Well, that's where groups like the Anti-Predator Project come in. They're the experts when it comes to cases with online predators and child exploitation. They bring a whole new level of know-how to the table.
Right. The podcast mentioned that Jessica started working with them in March of 2020. This is like 6 months after Alicia vanished. She said later she wished she'd reached out sooner, but there's no handbook for parents dealing with something this awful.
Absolutely. It really shows how important it is for people to know about these resources and to make sure families can get help when they need it most.
So what did the Anti-Predator Project actually do in Alicia's case? What was their approach?
They did a lot of things. First off, they were there for Jessica every step of the way. They gave her support and guidance and were just a constant presence in her life during this incredibly tough time. They answered her calls, listened to her worries, basically acted like a dedicated support system.
That must have meant the world to Jessica, especially with all the negativity she was getting online, people accusing her of not doing enough to protect Alicia. Having a team who believed in her and stood by her must have given her so much strength.
It definitely validated her experience and gave her a sense of power. But beyond that emotional support, they really dug into the investigation, too. They did their own searches, talked to potential witnesses, and followed up on every lead that came up.
It's like they were filling in those missing pieces, taking on a more focused role that the police, with their limited resources and sometimes outdated methods, couldn't handle.
Exactly. They brought their expertise on online predators and the digital world to the table. These are the people who understand how these criminals think, what signs to look for, and how to navigate the online world.
And that expertise is so important because remember how the podcast talked about the problems law enforcement has with cyber forensics? A lot of local agencies just aren't trained or equipped to handle all that digital evidence from computers and online platforms.
Yeah, it's a huge obstacle. It's like having a crime scene but not having the right tools to figure out what happened.
Like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And that's where the Anti-Predator Project saw a need. They're actually working on creating a national cyber forensics lab to help law enforcement agencies all over the country.
Now that would be amazing. Think about it, a central hub with all the latest technology and experts who can decipher all those digital trails left behind. It would be a huge step forward in giving law enforcement the tools they need to crack these cases.
But something like that takes time and money.
Right.
So while they're working on that long-term goal, what are they doing right now?
One of their main focuses is developing a new alert system just for missing kids. The idea is to have a faster and more effective way to notify everyone when a child disappears. It would get around some of the problems with the current systems, like Amber Alerts and Silver Alerts.
This is where it gets really interesting. They're partnering with a tech company that can send out alerts through cell phone signals and social media. Imagine how many people you could reach instantly. It'd be like having a nationwide network of eyes and ears.
It's incredibly innovative. They're using the technology that's already a part of our lives to create a rapid response network. It could really cut down on that critical time gap that often makes these cases so difficult.
And we all know how crucial time is in these situations, especially when a child's safety is at stake. Every minute counts.
Absolutely. The sooner information is out there, the sooner people can start looking, and the better the chances of finding that child safe. It's about using technology for good, turning it into a weapon against the very people who abuse it.
So even though this new alert system is still being developed, it gives me hope. It shows that people are thinking outside the box and coming up with new ways to find missing children in this digital age.
It really shows how dedicated the Anti-Predator Project is. They're not just reacting to these tragedies, they're trying to prevent them and make the world safer for children. They're shining a light on some very dark corners of the internet.
It's inspiring to see that kind of commitment especially in a case as heartbreaking as Alicia's.
Ugh.
It gives me hope knowing there are people out there fighting this fight.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge the darkness, but it's equally important to highlight those who are working to fight it. They're making a difference and giving a voice to those who might otherwise be silenced.
So while the Anti-Predator Project is working hard behind the scenes, Jessica is still out there fighting for her daughter. She hasn't given up hope, and she's using every platform she can to keep Alicia's story alive.
Her persistence is amazing. She keeps giving interviews, organizing searches, and raising awareness, all while dealing with the pain of not knowing where her daughter is or what happened to her. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit.
And she's become an advocate for other parents, too. Urging them to be vigilant, to talk to their kids about online safety, and to act fast if their child goes missing.
It's a powerful message. It comes from unimaginable pain, but it's fueled by this determination to protect other families from going through the same thing. It's a message that resonates with anyone who cares about children's safety.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift our focus to the bigger picture.
We'll talk about the challenges of balancing the online and offline worlds, the changing landscape of cybercrime, and what we can all do to create a safer digital world for everyone.
So as we kind of wrap things up with Alicia's case, the thing that really sticks with me is this whole balancing act. The good stuff about being online versus the risks. It's like we're in this brand new world where the rules are always changing.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like we're living in two different places at once. The real world, with laws and safety, and then the digital world, which feels kind of like the Wild West. Exciting, but also dangerous.
And for someone like Alicia, who felt so comfortable connecting with people online, it's tough because she might not have had those same skills in the real world.
It's a sad truth, isn't it? The place where she felt like she belonged also put her at risk. Okay. And it makes what Trent Steele was saying even more important, private investigator working with Jessica.
Oh, yeah. He had some really good advice for parents, like being involved in your kid's online life, setting boundaries, and knowing what to do if your child goes missing. It's like a safety checklist.
He's absolutely right. Prevention is key, but he also knows that when something bad does happen, you got to act fast.
And I like how he sees technology as this double-edged sword. It can be used by predators, but it can also be used to fight back. That's what the Anti-Predator Project is doing with that National Cyber Forensics Lab and the new alert system.
It's like they're saying we can use technology to outsmart the bad guys and protect the people who need it most.
I love that approach. But honestly, what really got to me in this whole case was Jessica's hope. Even with everything she went through, she never stopped looking for Alicia.
It's incredible how resilient she is. It shows the power of a mother's love and how even when it seems impossible, you don't give up hope.
And it wasn't just Jessica. We saw how dedicated the police were, the persistence of those private investigators. And then there are groups like the Anti-Predator Project. It's like a whole community coming together to fight for justice.
Yeah, it reminds us that even in the darkest times, there are people who care. People who are willing to stand up and say no more. And what they do, no matter how big or small, can make a real difference.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive into Alicia Navaro's disappearance has been heartbreaking, but it's also opened my eyes. We've seen how complicated online safety is, the challenges investigators face, and the incredible strength of a mother's love.
You've learned a lot about this case, but the one thing that's crystal clear is that this conversation needs to continue. How do we make both the online and offline worlds safer for everyone, especially those who are most vulnerable? That's the question we need to keep asking and working on.
And that's where we'll leave you today, listener, with a better understanding of the challenges, but also with a sense of hope that together we can make the digital world a place where everyone can feel safe and empowered. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.